the valley, let's turn it loud. Miami's pride, make us proud. CanesWear crew, you hear the crowd. Hurricanes ain't backing down. Every play, every score, raising bets and raising roar. Rocking orange, green galore. All for one and one for four. We got FTSN, taking names, win it again. Podcast fam, till the end. Tune in, now let's begin.
Yo, what is going on, Canes fans? As y'all know it, we got a big-time weekend ahead of us. We finally got our rivals, Florida State Seminoles. We will be playing at The Rock, 7 o'clock, ESPN, prime time, just how our Miami Hurricanes like it. And as y'all know, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button. This is the CanesWear Daily Podcast. I am your host, Brad Tejeda, only on the FTSN Network. And like I said at the beginning of the show, unless you Hurricane fans been hiding under a rock, you guys know the slogan, the hashtag for this weekend is Pack the Rock. Not only because this team is 7-0, but because we are going against our in-state rivals, the Florida State Seminoles. You guys know every single time this matchup is ahead, it's usually a gauntlet. It's usually a dogfight. But 2 years ago, when we faced this Florida State Seminole team in the Hard Rock Stadium at home, it wasn't a gauntlet. It wasn't a fight. Matter of fact, we got ran out of the building, ran out of our own stadium, 45-3. And before we break down a quote by Mario Cristobal after that football game, I want to bring in a Florida State, not only big-time booster, not only big-time fan for the Florida State Seminole football program, but this guy loves and endears his garnet and gold, whether it's men or women's sports teams. It doesn't matter what it is, who it is. He is garnet and gold, bleeds it from beginning to end, man. I got my guy, Pete the Greek. If you guys are on social media, especially on X, my guy hosts some of the best spaces out there, especially for Florida State Seminoles. And he always gives you the honest input reality, not just from a fandom's point of view. So I'm happy and honored to have Pete the Greek on the show to break down this matchup with us. Pete, what's up?
Hey, Brad, how are you? Yeah, rivalry week, man. It's one of the big ones, the one that we always look forward to. Wish we could reciprocate and be on the winning end, so it'd be even a more a greater matchup this week. But you know what's happening at Florida State right now, and we're struggling a bit. But we look forward to getting out in front of that, hopefully here in the near future. You know, I always say, right, when the Canes are good and the Noles are good, football's good, right?
Absolutely.
So, absolutely. So I really thank you for having me on. Thanks for the great intro. Like anything else, I grew up on Hurricane football. So you guys are that team, and kind of like on my right shoulder that always says, hey, I hope they do okay too. So anyways.
Absolutely. And you're one of the few Florida State Seminole fans, whether you guys are riding on the high end or on the low end, you always look at the other side of things and what could we improve and what could we get better. And to your point, as you mentioned before, this is a Florida State Seminole team that is currently 1-6. There isn't too many positive things to look at this football team currently, but we'll dig into a little bit of those, your strengths and weaknesses, and some of the players we need to watch for this rivalry. But like I said at the beginning of the show, man, 2 years ago, obviously this is a rivalry that goes back all the way from the beginning, right? There's not too many bigger rivalries, not only in college football, but in all sports that are as big as the Miami, Florida State, wide left, wide right, the rain game with Sean Taylor. I mean, the games go on and on with all the great players, right? But going back 2 years ago, the last time we played Florida State in our own stadium, we got blown out 45-3. You guys were on the trajectory of being one of the top teams in college football. We saw what happened last year with the great season you guys had until the end, unfortunately. But going back to that matchup in that game in particular, I was at that game. I left in the middle of the second quarter because it was such an embarrassment. But after that football game, losing 45-3, knowing that a guy, Mario Cristobal, who's not only played in these rivalry games, but now has the honor to coach them for his alma mater, he said this quote, Pete. He said, I don't care about that stuff. If it's their job to score and it's our job to stop them, one day we'll switch the shoes. That was after getting their butts kicked 45-3 at home. Fast forward to 2 years now, Pete. At this day and age, October 22nd, this Saturday, 7 o'clock, you got to think Mario Cristobal, the type of mentality, the type of team he currently has, Heisman candidate quarterback in Cam Ward, the great weapons we have,
Sure.
ranked number 6 in the nation, undefeated going against a 1-6 Florida State team. You got to think that quote and the loss 45-3 has to be playing not only in his head, but some of these players that were in that moment. What's your thoughts from 2 years ago to now and kind of the drop off of what's
Well,
happening with Florida State?
Absolutely, Brad. I think you hit it. You nailed it right on the head. He's looking at this as, hey, statement, number one. Number two is, hey, I got to get payback, right? It's your rival. Forever and ever, at least when I was there and it was relevant and we went back and forth, we were the little brother, right? Florida State. Now it's time for Big Brother to pay back and get some retribution. And I think he's in a right spot. He has done everything that he needs to. I think Mario and Norvell have a lot of similarities. They're both competitors. I think they're both learning, and as they learn, they figure out, hey, we are going to be more the figurehead. And I think Norvell's starting to learn that this year, that you need to surround yourself with good coaches and trust the process and make sure that you got everything in place. Mario had the luxury of coaching under Saban, so he saw the blueprint. And now that he's seen what he needs to do, it looks like this year you guys have kind of he's let off a little bit on the micromanagement side. That's how I would perceive it. He's letting his coach do what they need to do, and he brought in the right guys, obviously, to help him coach his staff. So, I mean, if you ask me, quite honestly, he's learned over time. It's taken some bumps and bruises, but he's done it right too. He's gone out to the high schools, made the relationships. I talked to some of the guys here locally, and they're really, saying, hey, he recruits well at the high school level. He brings in the right people, and he hit on the portal. I mean, you got firepower there galore. You got the right receivers. You got the right quarterback. The O-line looks very healthy and strong. So, I mean, sky's the limit right now. There's a reason that they are 6th in the country.
Yeah, Pete, and one of the reasons why I wanted to bring that up is you brought up the word leadership, right? And I think us Miami Hurricane fans, we're starting to realize something that you Florida State Seminoles kind of had in last year, that some of the deficits and some of the coaching things, that whether it was game planning, in-game coaching, or just some of the players on offense or defense that weren't very consistent. When you have a dynamic quarterback like a Jordan Travis last year, like a Cam Ward this year, right? A lot of those mistakes kind of get on the back burner because you have a quarterback and a leader that can hide a lot of those things, and it just benefits a whole football program, right? Having a leader and a guy like Jordan Travis that meant so much to the Florida State program the last 4 or 5 years, and just the huge drop-off that you're seeing this year from last year, what are some of the things that you think are allocated and the reasons why that Florida State is going through a tough time currently without Jordan Travis and some of the leaders you guys had last year?
That's a great question, Brad. And it's something that, you can kind of see behind the scenes. I've talked to or spoken with a couple of our past leaders. Particularly, I've gotten to be friends with Tatum Bethune's dad, Gregory Bethune. He's here from South Florida, and Rob Deloche. And, those guys were what you call leaders on and off the field. And you need that. Leadership is so underrated. And even back to the days of, I'm gonna reference or quote myself right here. Schnellenberger. Schnellenberger looked for that guy.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have to be great. His interview process, Schnellenberger, and obviously Bernie Crozar, and I've seen these guys here locally, and I've talked to them. His blueprint was, hey, I don't need that over the top 4 or 5 star. What I want is a 3 to 4 star that is nasty, that is an alpha, but he also can bring it to the field. And that's what they're missing right now. And that's where you see a little bit of a shift for us. Those guys were having their meetings after the meeting, right? They had their players meeting. They were extra reps on the field. They were doing all the little things. And like Schnellenberger, he wanted those guys. And if you remember, he kept a lot of the so-called underrated players here. The Melvin Brattons of the world, the guys that didn't get big looks. And guess what? He put it together and he realized that, hey, leadership was everything. And those guys pushed each other. They held each other accountable. And those are the little things that you need to do to be successful. Sometimes you can have a team full of 5 stars. I mean, you just saw Ohio State go to Oregon and they didn't walk away with the win. So, I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's that. And that's what you need in your locker room. And I think what happened with us is we didn't hit on that. And the guys coming back probably didn't have that leader that stood out. And then the guys coming in on the portal didn't buy in quite like they thought they would. So now you have what you have. So a coach is going to have a real uphill battle, but I think he can do it, long term. You just have to mix it up.
Now, before we get into this matchup of the big-time rivalry with Florida State and Miami and break down some of these key players and key components of the football game to determine this outcome of the game, I want to rewind a little bit to this offseason, right? After Jordan Travis leaves Florida State, you guys had the remarkable year you guys had. As you know, with the transfer portal, like you mentioned, it's a big hit and miss ratio, right? It could really determine the outcome of your season. Miami was in the predicament last year on the opposite end of things where you guys were on the positive end. You fast forward to now, and now we're on the positive and you're on the opposite. Now, a lot of that had to do with one decision in particular. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, not only are you a booster for Florida State, but you are in close relations and you do, you don't necessarily make the decision, but you're around some big decision makers that know a lot of what's going on behind the scenes. And I think one of the kind of things that were kind of speculated this offseason, right, was the decision of Florida State going with DJU over a Cam Ward. Just rewinding back to that certain situation, which obviously sets a huge outcome of possibly this football game and the seasons of both of ours currently this year. But was that a decision that, when you look at it from a social media perspective, people that don't necessarily have the capability and the resources that you have at Florida State, was that a decision that Florida State made of taking DJU over Cam Ward, or was it more of smoke and mirrors and it was really DJU and that's all Florida State was really concerned and wanted?
Now, I think with his decision was based on the fact that, again, I'm going to say there were a lot of thought. The thought process was that we were going to be able to move the ball. We had a few of our offensive line coming back, and we were going to set him up for a W, for himself, DJ. Give him a little protection up front, run the ball, screen, run the ball, maybe go over the top. And I think that was really, I mean, if I'm a betting man, that was a decision that really put it all together. And the kids, listen, at the end of the day, DJ is a great character, young man. He's a nice young man. He fits the mold. He fits what he's trying to do there, Norvell. He's trying to get that team, not only optically to look good on the field, but optically to do the right things in the community and, within the program. Because, like I know, a lot of times you bring in just an athlete that's there to, get to the next level, and he might not be a high character guy. And then all of a sudden you're guilty by association as a program, like, oh my God, look what this young man did out there. And it speaks to your program. Georgia's feeling a little bit of that right now, in the social media and just in general. So I think that probably had a lot to do with coach's decision making, and look, DJ had the highest red zone rating last year with his team, so you figured, hey, maybe we're going to have some success here. I think that's what really it boiled down to. And, of course, I think, Ward kind of was on the fence. He was looking at NFL/university, and that probably held up the process as well. So.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I knew you were one of the few people, behind the scenes that actually kind of understood the process that was going on. And obviously, when you watch social media and Twitter and things, there's a lot of conspiracies and a lot of misleading information out there. So I wanted to bring that up. Now, fast forwarding 7 weeks go by. Florida State's currently 1-6. DJU is unfortunately not the quarterback for Florida State due to an injury. And our Miami Hurricanes, one of the few undefeated teams left in college football, Heisman not only candidate in Cam Ward, but is looking like the leader for the Heisman candidate race currently.
Sure.
And whether it's Patrick Mahomes or some of these other players like Micah Parsons buying Cam Ward jerseys and wearing it on their podcast, seems like everyone's a fan of Cam Ward, but yet the Miami Hurricanes are still getting disrespected, whether it's rankings, whether it's the media perspective. And obviously going into this matchup against Florida State, we're definitely still going to get disrespected because we all know that this is a bloodbath, right? These kids, these young men that are going to be playing this Saturday at the Hard Rock, a lot of these young men have been playing since Pop Warner, right? These are best friends. These are guys that have grown up with each other.
Absolutely.
So,
I think Ward has merited everything that he's getting. I think that he walked into a great situation for himself and for the University of Miami. I think if he may have walked into our situation, and as porous as our offensive line has been, I don't know that he would have that same success. Just speaking honestly, I think he's in a situation where you surrounded him with nice weapons. You have some nice tight ends. You have a wide receiver room that's really clutch when they need to be. Your running back, he came out and he was on fire, Martinez. So, you can just say, hey, it's a nice compliment to what he brings to the table. And he brings that mobility that you can't really get that. You either have it or you don't. You saw it with Jordan Travis. Very elusive. He reminds me a little bit of Charlie Ward. He's not this guy that's going to light it up, but he knows exactly when he looks back and he's like, oh, okay, they're coming. Let me take off. That kind of quarterback. So he's very, very pocket aware, good presence. You guys are lucky to have him.
Yeah, you're not lying, man. Shout out to Calvin and Patrice and the whole Ward family, man. I've been on the Ward train even when he was still at Washington State. So it's glad to see it's finally coming to fruition, man. But going back to the offense, I'm going to be honest with you, Pete. I don't think I've ever seen an opening spread for a Florida State Miami game where the spread is at 21 points, right? That is unheard of in a rivalry game, especially Florida State Miami. But I think there's some reason behind it, right? I want to talk about your offensive Florida State and kind of what you're looking for in this football game, because as we know, no matter what happened throughout this season, when it comes to Florida State and Miami, you got to crumble it all up and throw it out the window, right? Because you really don't know what you're going to get out of these guys in this type of matchup. But when you really look at the stats and just overall of this 1-6 Florida State team, right? Like I mentioned before, DJU is no longer the quarterback. Looking right off the bat with the quarterback situation, it's obvious we got Cam Ward. We know what he's going to do and bring to the table. But when you look at guys like Brock and Luke as well, these are two guys that are combined with only 2 passing touchdowns, don't have a lot of opportunities in front of them. If I'm not mistaken, they got right under 70 passing attempts between the two this football season. And they haven't really progressed in offense, right? I believe you've only scored more than 20 points one time at the beginning of the year. Ever since then, you had 16 points or less. What are some things you are looking for Florida State on the offensive side of the football, specifically at quarterback, to really try to score some points? Lining up against the offense and Cam Ward, it's going to be hard to.
Great question, Brad. And I'll say this. Bain is back. Mm-hmm. Bain is back. So that disruption up front really leaves you very little to do. I don't even think they really need to stack the box, obviously, because your 3 tackles are NFL quality. Really what's going to boil down to is if they can move the pocket, maybe test your DBs, but your DBs are pretty tested right now. So, I mean, that's really the best shot they have. If we get some of the younger tight ends, and you're talking about Brad, they're bringing in youth. This is youth. You're going to see a lot of mistakes out there. You're going to see a lot of blown assignments, and that's just because we've, unfortunately, once your game plan changes, you have to adapt. And right now, you really have to just move that pocket and hope for the best. And that's what I'd say. You really, your linebackers are phenomenal. So, you have a lot that you're going up against. It's going to be a really tough uphill battle for those guys. And they haven't seen this kind of speed yet. I think Clemson might have been as close as you're going to get. And I don't even think those guys stack up to what you have. So it's going to be very interesting on that side of the ball, for sure.
I'll say this on our end, on Miami's point of view, just speaking personally, what I've seen from our defense the last few weeks has obviously been, shaking my head type of reaction at times. And thankfully and luckily, between Cam Ward and our offense, just the willingness to be able to score every drive when needed. And then our defense, when it really just comes down to the last couple drives or the last quarter, that's when we find a way to get these stops, right? But I will say this, our secondary has gone up against some tougher quarterbacks that will test our secondary. And to your point, you talk about the youth of Florida State. We've gone up against some tough matchups as far as the wide receiver and skill positions, especially this past weekend against Louisville. And even though I can say that when you look at from a talent standpoint, Florida State, even though they're 1-6, they still got a lot of talent. Let's not get it twisted. There's a lot of guys on this roster.
Oh, they have it.
Really play some football, right? But to your point, there's going to be a lot of youth there, a lot of growing pains, and this is a game in particular, as you know, you can't have false starts and those little penalties, because those are the little things that could end up costing you the football game and close rivalries like this. But who are some guys, you brought up the youth aspect, who are some younger guys that may have not necessarily been able to understand or experience this rivalry between Florida State and Miami? Maybe this is their first opportunity at a crack at it. But give me some guys on offense that you're looking for in Florida State, to where if they're going to be able to put up some points, like I mentioned before, they fell under 16 points almost every game this year. Who are some guys on the offensive side of the ball you're looking forward to?
Hakeem Williams is one that stands out for me. And you know him well because he's a product of South Florida. Getting him the ball in open space would be phenomenal. We have a running back there that you saw him break one for a touchdown, Singleton, a lot of speed. If you can get on the edge with Miami, that's the problem, is getting on the edge, right? Because they're so good at side to side that those are the things that you just, it's talent against talent. And right now, Miami has the luxury of having a little bit more seasoned talent. And I think that's where we're going to see a little bit of a struggle. I like our second quarterback, Luke Cromenhawk. Real nice touch on the ball. I don't know if you were able to watch that game the other night against Duke, but I mean, he has a nice touch, long ball. We just need our players to do what they're capable of doing, catching those balls, breaking them for the long yardage. And right now, it has not bounced our way. Just hasn't. We do have talent out there. It's just a matter of getting it into the right hands. So I think those are some of the names. I mean, Cam Akers, obviously, he got a little bit banged up, but he's a nice bruiser.
Cam Davis.
Cam Davis. I'm sorry. Cam Davis. He's a bruiser, but he's going up against a stacked box. Can't do anything there. So those are the things that we're going to have to work around. And we have a couple freshmen on our offensive line.
Now, before we switch over to the defensive side of the ball, you brought up, Bain coming back, obviously, and some of the other great defensive linemen that we have on that front four that we switch and alternate. Offensive line group of Florida State. I haven't watched much Florida State this year, unfortunately, and I know last year you guys had a pretty decent offensive line. How's been the offensive line in your eyes this year, and is everyone healthy? Are there some guys that are going to be switching positions? Are there guys that are going to be having a first start this upcoming game? How's the O-line looking for Florida State?
The O-line is pretty shaky because you do have a lot of injury on the O-line, and he's trying to mix and match quite a bit. You really have a couple tackles there that are just not fully developed. Young man Otto, he's really going to be something special. Hopefully he gets his opportunity and gets a little bit more. I mean, opportunities up the line, but these are young guys, and as well as I know that you come in as a freshman and sophomore, you're just not ready physically, your body. It takes you 2 to 3 years to get that college look and then that NFL look. So, I mean, I think that's where they struggle the most, and surprisingly, because we thought that would be the strength of our team. And then Brad, of course, that I mentioned that before. I think Coach really thought that was going to be his ticket with DJ, but we're just not getting that right now. So
Now
I
on the
think
defensive side of the ball,
go ahead.
I was going to say, now on the defensive side of the ball, you also brought in a bunch of transfer guys, from big time programs that didn't necessarily have starts or a lot of time under their belt, but they were, highly rated 4 or 5-star guys from other big time programs. And going to the defensive side of the ball, this is where I thought you guys would really, be the bread and butter of this team to where it could really pull DJ and this offense out of some ruts this season. But like I said before, this was a team that also on the defensive side of the ball has been struggling, whether it's guys, to your point, not buying in. You got guys taking trips to other places in the country, in the middle of a week before a football game. And then you look back at this recent matchup of Florida State against Duke, right? The first time ever Florida State loses to a Duke football program in history with Manny Diaz as the head coach. But the glaring thing that I saw in that game was Duke barely got that win, but the stat of their quarterback throwing for under 80 yards to get a W really caught me by surprise of looking into this matchup now. We got a quarterback in Cam Ward that's probably going to throw 80 yards within the first drive of the game, right? So how do you expect Florida State's defense to recover after a few tough weeks and really hold a guy in Cam Ward in this offense that's the number one offense in the country, and it seems like no one's been able to stop him?
It's going to be a monumental task for these guys. I mean, they do have, Farmer up front with Jackson. Those are guys that are prototypical NFL kind of guys, where you have a little bit of a challenge is going to be setting the edge, right? Making sure you could set that edge. Cam may not have to do too much if they get some guys on the outside. I'm just being realistic. And you do have some veterans back there. You have Shaheem back there. You have a few of the guys that have been there for a while. But your linebacker core here, they're young, again, making the reads. And that's been kind of our Achilles right there. I think Miami gets their yardage this game. I mean, it's inevitable. I'm just a realist, right? I'm one of those guys that don't look at just rainbows and unicorns. I look at the actual product on the field. And that's kind of been what really has separated Miami from everybody else, is that he can extend the plays. He can make it an easy play down the field, just like he can roll out, and miss a tackle. Somebody will miss him, and he'll just cut it up the field. So it's going to be hard to contain him, in my opinion. So, I mean, you got to bring the front end, and I'm almost one of those guys. I'd love to be in Coach's ear to say, Coach, just blitz every time.
For sure. Now, one thing I do want to ask you, right, is that when you do look at this defense of Florida State, the same way I look at Miami's defense, right? I'm going to be real as well. As great as our team is, undefeated, right? Number one offense in the country. Our defense is subpar at best, right? But I will say this, when I do watch our defense each and every week, I don't necessarily coaching or a game plan or a scheme aspect that's really hurting this team. I just think, unfortunately, between just the little small things of fundamentals, keeping your eyes not in the backfield, right? The open tackling, of just having the one-on-one tackling or missing reads, just those little small things that football players get taught all the way from Pop Warner. I think those are the things that's really hurting this Miami's defense. When you look at Florida State's defense, do you think it's a little bit of both? If it's some coaching, some game planning and scheme, or do you just think you don't have enough Jimmies with the Joes? But where is your aspect looking at this defense side of the ball? Because obviously with the offensive side, not having your star quarterback most of the year, and guys being banged up, that's pretty obvious on the offense. But on the defensive side of the ball, where do you feel like the nuts and bolts are with that defense?
I think really honestly, it's a little bit of both, but I'm not going to put it on Coach Fuller because he just coached a team to 13-1, right? That didn't change, right? The alphas changed, the Jimmies and the Joes changed. So, I think that part has to be where I'm going to go back to leadership. You have to have those guys communicating, talking, and I think some of that has gone by the wayside. And I know a lot of people around my circles will kill me for that, but I really don't think that Fuller has changed any of his concepts. I think it's just making the play right. I mean, being in the right place at the right time, being able to read it, being able to communicate. And one of the things that I noticed with the University of Miami football team, when I watched that Florida game, there was a lot of chatter on that field, if you really noticed it. Your linebackers were talking to your tackles looking back, talking to your linebackers looking back to your corners, like, hey, that side, it's coming on your side, that kind of stuff. And I think that's what you need. And back to leadership, that I think is if you really think about it, we have about 5 or 6 players playing in the NFL right now that were on that roster. So that's a big part of it. I think, you just got to get the right mix. And unfortunately, he didn't get the right mix this go around. We'll see how it goes next round.
Absolutely. Well, before we get you out of here, Pete, like I said before, man, thank you as always for stopping by the CanesWear Daily Podcast, only on FTSN, for joining us.
Thank you so much,
before
Brad.
I get to your score prediction of this football game, please let Miami, Florida State fans, and any other football fans that are tuned in and watching, where can they find your work and some of the things that you bring to the table?
So I do some spaces. I'll do one this Friday at 5:00. I have Mankiewicz on, and he's a World Series first baseman, played for FSU. I like to bring back the older guys, talk to them, talk to them about their journey. I love getting on with you guys and being the facilitator because I don't allow the trolling on my spaces, right?
Yeah.
But that's pretty much what I do, and it's something that I enjoy. I like to use social platform positively, and I think that's one of the things that we're missing today. So we gotta take advantage when we get the time. And hey, good luck to you guys, Brad. I know you do a fantastic job, and thanks for having me. And this is gonna kill me right now, right? But go Canes!
Oh, right, man. Look at that. We got Pete the Greek, the Florida State booster, saying go Canes before the score prediction. I'm loving it. Man, y'all got to make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and give Pete a follow, man. Like I said before, he does great work on Twitter Spaces, man. He's never about trolling. He's an open platform guy. It doesn't matter if you're a Florida State or Miami fan, or even UCF. Every once in a while, we care about those guys too, right? But it doesn't matter who you root for.
I do believe Garnet and gold. Right, Brad? I do bleed garnet and gold. So,
yes, yes, you do. You do. So you bleed in garnet and gold. Let's get to the final thing for this show before we get you out of here, man. I know you got a busy day and week ahead of you.
I love it to be like a 35-17 prediction. So we'll see.
Okay.
35. I think Canes, obviously, but I'd really like for us to put on a good game. Just for us to, enjoy ourselves and be able to banter a little bit at the stadium and have a good time. So,
are you going to be at the game?
I will be. I will be at the game. All right. I'll hit you up. All
right.
Take care.
Perfect. Sounds great, Pete. And thanks again, as always, for joining the show, man. You're welcome anytime. And let's give our guy Pete a follow on Twitter as well.
All right, brother. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, man. Thank you as always. Well, there you had it, folks. We had our guy, Pete the Greek, FSU booster, big time Florida State Seminole fan, whether it's football, basketball, gymnastics. It don't matter if it's boys or girls. This guy bleeds the garnet and gold, and it was a pleasure chopping it up with Pete. And like I said before, folks, we had a loaded show all week on this CanesWear Daily Live podcast, only on FTSN. Make sure you go rewatch, hit that like, hit that subscribe button. And before we get out of here, please make sure if you need any Miami Hurricanes, Miami Marlins, Inter Miami, champion Florida Panthers, Miami Dolphins gear, make sure you get it only on CanesWear.com. So please hit that like and subscribe button. I'm your host, Brad Tejeda, only on the FTSN network. We out.